Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. Try not to keep you guys waiting too long. I'm sure some more people will be filling in here shortly. 2013 Hyundai Veloster. This came to me a couple months ago. I've already diagnosed it, but I have since purchased the vehicle from the customer. They didn't want to fix it, or they didn't want to put any more money into the car. And I've been waiting for an opportunity like this to actually go through the diagnostic process again. So customer complaint is it cranks fine, but it will not start. This does have the turbocharged engine. I'm not sure what the VIN code is for that one. There's two different options. I think they're the same engine size, 1.6 or 1.8. But this one does have the turbo. Customer said a few months ago, or a few months before he brought it in, he replaced the turbocharger. He couldn't give us a good explanation of why, but I think he said there's a little bit of noise, maybe a underboost code. He put a used turbo on, I believe. And at that point, when it wouldn't start, I think he said that he put a fuel pump in. That's the information that he gave us. So I'll let you guys pick what we do first. I already have done a full system scan, so we don't have to wait for that. But if you want to hear it crank over, anything like that, then you guys let me know what we should do first.
You bringing up the chat as well?
Yeah, just in case I have to decipher something.
Val's playing Call of Duty right now. No, Chad won't let me. He said I have to read comments.
Okay, Mario says pre-scan. You want to pull up the scanner?
Yes.
While you guys are coming up with additional tests, we will go through the pre-scan. So we have and I'm not sure how clear you guys can see this, but we have a 2192 system rich at high loads, bank 1, random misfire, cylinder 4 misfire, fuel pump primary circuit code, crankshaft A, system voltage high, and another crankshaft A. So let me know if you want to go further in depth on any one of those codes or what the next step should be. Jay says cam and crank. You've been waiting since yesterday to ask for a cam and crank sensor correlation. Waiting for the next test. Do we want to jump cam and crank right now, or do we want to do a different test first? Scope crankshaft, cam crank. Okay, that seems to be the popular vote, right? If I'm reading that right. I can't see all of it on my laptop.
Yeah. RC test, cam crank, scope crankshaft, exhaust.
Okay. We want to do just the crankshaft first or cam and crank? Luckily, I did put some piercing probes on the crank sensor wires because I assumed that Jay was going to want cam and crank.
Verify complaint.
Verify complaint.
CKP voltages.
Okay, verify complaint. Let's crank it over.
Do you want me to leave it on scanner?
You can go to main. Give me 1 second. I lost tools.
Did you get lost?
I did get lost.
Okay, bye.
It sounded like the battery was a little weak. I'm just going to put a jump pack on it for now.
System voltage high, powers and grounds. And how do I shrink my frame?
Your frame?
Yes. My borders are a little wonky. Hi.
Hold Alt.
6 feet. Oh, sorry. Hold Alt me. Thank you. Now I can't move from this spot. Got it.
Yeah. System voltage too high. That code may have been set if I had a battery charger on it while I was doing any testing. I don't remember if I did. The car's been sitting out in the parking lot for a couple months, and I have not charged the battery since. Now, crankshaft is a VR sensor, so it's an AC signal. Do we want to go?
Still want main or under hood?
You can go under hood. I'm not exactly sure which one is going to be our positive voltage wire. We could go across them, but if we're going to add additional channels later on, then we're going to have their scope grounded.
RC test while cranking?
RC test while cranking. We'll get the crank sensor capture going first, and then we'll jump into that.
Scanner?
Scanner. So we're going to go 4-channel lab scope. Now you notice I do have RPM up on the screen. We talked about this yesterday and I didn't know how to do it, so I figured out how to put that on there if we are doing ignition testing. I'm going to shut that off for now because we don't need it for this capture. But under setup, view, display, we can view the kV and the RPM for our ignition testing. So channel 1, we're going to be voltage. Channel 2 we're not using right now. It's going to be an AC signal. We're only measuring one side of it. We'll start at maybe 10 volts. It shouldn't be that high, but we'll start there. Put some time on the screen just to make sure we're getting a signal. And then once we want to zoom in, I'll put a shorter time base.
Guess we aren't spoiled with the Pico scope, Jay.
Not yet. I still had everything set up from yesterday, so we are going to continue with the snap-on scope.
You got a super chat from Keith. It's a little pear giving you a fist bump.
Okay, Keith, you got 3 minutes to tell us what's wrong. I think that was the deal from yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Keith is going to tell us in the first 3 minutes. Okay, now we didn't get a signal on here that I saw while I was cranking it, but we did get a bias voltage of, looks like 2.5 volts. So let me go onto the other wire of the crank sensor and we'll see what kind of signal we get.
Chad sounds like a legit teacher. Oh, wait.
I'm a legit teacher from home now. We no longer have student contact.
Stay safe at work. I don't even know symptoms or codes yet.
Was that Keith?
Yeah.
Oh, you must have got here late. We pulled codes. We have a crank sensor code. Actually, I can pull it up real quick. Cylinder 4 misfire, crankshaft sensor A. Rich running, random misfire, fuel pump primary, system voltage high. We actually have 2 crank sensor A codes. We have a circuit code and a performance code. So I didn't get a crank sensor signal or pulse at all on either one of the wires of the crank sensor. Now I could go and remove my ground and go across the signal, see if we have maybe a smaller signal. What test do you guys want me to do next? We're not appearing to get a signal from the crankshaft. I know someone mentioned an RC test, but we just verified that we don't have a crank sensor signal. It is or should be connected. Everything should be connected. It all looks good. Another way that we could check crank sensor signal to the computer is we could look at the data on the PCM side. We could look for RPM, PID, see if we get any change in that. Needs a new PCM, duh. Did you see any other tests that were wanting to be performed yet?
No, I'm still kind of working my way through the side chat.
I saw RPM data. Voltage drop the engine block. No, it is a 2-wire sensor on this sensor.
You see Mario's comment?
Uh-uh.
Remove sensor, watch RPM, and move a screwdriver across the sensor.
Okay, let me turn the key on. Let's check for RPM on the scanner real quick. Got to have the key on so we can communicate and get our data PIDs up on the screen.
3-wire sensor?
2-wire.
Okay, that was Mr. Wilson asking.
We don't have RPM.
Run test light on sensor? Jay? Yeah, whatever Mario said. Oz.
Okay, we're looking at RPM on the scanner real quick. Let me crank it over, and then we'll lift it up and actually remove the sensor from the engine and check it that way. Okay, so it looked like we had no RPM change until, well, or did we? Was that during cranking?
You asking me or the crowd? I was watching the chat.
I guess I might have missed it. Let me turn the key back on. Maybe we did have an RPM signal when it started cranking over faster. Sorry, waiting for the scanner to recommunicate. And it's not going to cooperate. As soon as I walk over here, it's going to communicate. You want the VIN. I'm not sure what digit it is, but
It moved while cranking.
the 4th digit is a D,
Oh.
and it looks like the 7th digit is a D. So I'm guessing that either one of those, I don't see an E, except for way down at the end of the VIN. No, I might be reading that wrong. Give me one sec. Okay, 8th is an E. I was reading the wrong VIN number. Okay, we're gonna have to stop our communication and go back in. It got confused when I told it to communicate while I had the key off. Spark, compression, fuel, battery. Okay, I got a jump pack on it, so our battery should be good. Spark, fuel, not sure. Compression, we haven't checked yet. So what you guys were wanting me to do is take a screwdriver, wave it across the sensor, see if we get a signal. Are you wanting that on the scanner data or on the scope data? Do I need to read through these? Or was there a next test?
I mean, there's a lot of info coming out. I'm not sure if it's any like a test they want you to do.
Okay, PJ said 2-wire Hall effect sensor. AC coupled waveform so we get a clearer voltage. We're not seeing all the voltage dropping. May work off at amperage.
And Keith just said, no, sir, 1 wire is enough.
Okay. Scanner.
Yes. What year is the vehicle?
2013.
How many cam sensors does it have?
It has two. It has a cam sensor on each bank. It has variable valve timing on both cams as well. Okay, I got the RPM back on the screen. Let me crank it over one more time because I want to see if the RPM picked up on the scanner once it started cranking over faster, because it seems like we had a couple seconds of slower cranking and then it picked up speed.
I switched to the camera with you right when you tripped. We make a great team.
Okay, so it looks like I did not have RPM on the scan tool when it was cranking over slower. It wasn't until we started cranking over a little bit faster that it picked up on the scan tool. And we lost communication. Make sure the key's back on. So what happens when I have push button start? So now would you like to see scope data? We'll crank it over longer until we get to that period that it actually has a RPM signal. Or it could be getting the RPM signal from the cam sensor and ignoring the crank sensor at that point.
Is it getting air, filter check, MAF signal? Fuel pressure, sensor air gap.
Okay, if it's fuel, shouldn't we be able to spray some starting fluid or something in the intake manifold? Actually, if I unhook this hose, we'll allow additional air in past after the filter, so that'll take that out of the equation. Since someone asked about fuel, let me just go ahead and spray a little bit of starting fluid in there, and then we'll crank it over. And then we'll, as we're cranking it over, we'll watch our scope data of the crank sensor. And PJ recommended AC coupling, so I'll turn that on as well.
Scanner.
And we won't need
Yep.
10 volts at this point.
Scanner.
Yeah.
There's one that says Mario already mentioned how to test that theory. I'm not sure.
And some of the comments are going by super fast, so I may not be able to pick them all up.
I'm scrolling back up looking for him.
I keep losing communication because I'm still under data when I turn the key off and it has a push button start. And by the time I scroll, I get the engine turned back on, I lose communication. So I don't see any change in RPM, at least on a large scale, when the RPM is picking up on the scan tool. Someone recommended global data to see if the RPM signal is showing up there. Now, I'm not sure if that will show up different than enhanced data if it's substituting a value.
Is there a data pod for fuel pressure?
I'm just looking to see if there's a sensor on it.
And that's Richard Kindred asking. Noid? Joe?
Okay, but we still don't have a RPM signal to the scope.
SMA Magic Fluid? X Motorsports?
Okay, fuel data. Now the customer did say that he changed the fuel pump, but it didn't start with alternative fuel either. I'm just looking in here, see if we have a fuel PID.
No, could start. We want problem present. Mr. Wilson?
Okay. So we know that we don't have a signal coming from the crank sensor. Early on, Mario recommended pulling the sensor out, waving a screwdriver across it to see if we get a signal that way. I think someone else mentioned tapping a test light to ground to see if we get a signal that way. I think Mario posted first, so we will, let me just go ahead and lift it up and we'll verify that. We'll leave everything connected up top. I'll make sure that the key's on so we can communicate with it, and we'll wave a screwdriver in front of it, see if we get any activity.
Hold up. Stop. I don't know how high you're going. You see that cord over there that's
Yeah.
connected? Just making sure.
Okay, so looking underneath here, I put this car back exactly how I found it when the customer brought it in. Stuff's falling, scaring me. Let me actually, I want to show you guys what I can see without having to move the other camera. Hopefully I can do this with the borescope. Give me 1 second to connect this.
Let me know if you want me to switch screens right now. You are in screen scanner.
Go to my laptop.
Yep.
So this is how the vehicle came in to the shop when I received it. The crank sensor bolt is broken off and the crank sensor is protruding from the engine block. Okay, back to main. So since the engine or the crank sensor is already unbolted, do we still want to pop it out, run a screwdriver by it? Or do we want to pop it back into the engine and crank it over and check for a signal again? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and pop it in, and then we'll see what we get. Because it's obviously a problem to have the crank sensor hanging out of the engine like that. So it did snap in pretty well, just with the O-ring that's on there. So I don't know if the customer broke the bolt off and didn't get the sensor in all the way or not. And also the locking tab on the crank sensor connector is broken. So I temporarily put it back into place with a zip tie, so we don't have to worry about it coming unplugged during this test. I also don't know if this is the exact crank sensor for the vehicle because the harness is actually about 2 inches too short
Squishing me.
to be connected back onto the mounting bracket. You getting squished?
Yeah, that was me getting squished by the car.
Is Keith over his 3-minute limit?
Yes, but only by 14. I don't know.
Okay, let me go back to our scope. I guess we could just try to start it up. But just to see if we get a signal.
Scanner?
Yes, scanner's fine. And I am still on AC couple. I'm at 5 volts, which may be not quite enough. Okay, so we're still not starting. Let me cycle the key. Off and back on, we'll try it again.
I told you it's not the crank sensor. That's just the byproduct of owner tinkering. Keith.
Absolutely it is. So we're still, I want to zoom in a little more. I thought we'd have to expand our scale, but maybe 1 volt. crank it.
Did you say fuel pump replaced? Maybe they fiddled with and broke the crank sensor bolt when they were testing it. Corey.
So after I purchased the vehicle from the customer, he did admit to replacing the crank sensor as well. So I don't know if it had the crank sensor code before the customer messed with it, or if he was just reading information off the forums and decided to replace it. Okay, we have a crank sensor signal at this point, but we're still not starting.
Bad cam sensor, Jay.
Bad cam sensor.
Brake clean, Craig.
Okay. So alternative fuel, now that we have a crank sensor signal, alternative fuel to see if we still have a fueling issue. Still got starting fluid on my bench. It does take a little bit to get through all that, but we'll spray some in there.
Amplitude.
Amplitude. You hold on. Stumbling on my words here. I am set on a 1 volt AC coupled scale. It looks like most of it. Let me turn that off.
Can we do an FRP PID? I think Keith might have asked that a while ago and I missed it. Sorry, Keith.
Is he asking again?
Yes. Sorry.
So I have the key on. The push button start doesn't like me.
I want to see that 28 psi. He knows we can't. All caps. Mr. Wilson.
Okay, let's see if that gives us enough information. So we have fuel rail pressure set point. We have absolute value. And just trying to flip through here. So it looks like our current rail pressure is 38. Now Keith may know what the actual spec of this is, but I sprayed some ether in there. Let's go ahead and crank it over. We'll watch this PID to see if we lose fuel pressure while it's cranking. And I don't think, actually this is a GDI vehicle, so I'm not sure if it shows what the high pressure rail is, or if that is our high pressure reading.
Check fuel pressure manually.
Okay, so we tried to start it. It failed to start. What did our rail pressure get up to? Not very high. How do I stop this? Pause that. So our rail pressure didn't get very high. So what does that indicate to us? That we still have a fuel pump issue, or do we now have a issue with the high pressure fuel pump? Someone said check pressure with a mechanical gauge.
Is there a knock?
Is that a question?
No, it's a statement.
So engine sounds bad. High pressure fuel isn't needed for starting. Anyone hear that? It's got a little bit of a ticking noise. Okay. What should our next step be? Ether with a good crank sensor, it should fire off. So spray a little more ether in there. See if that helps it. Maybe the system was never fully bled out after replacing the fuel pump. Okay, so we heard a little more noise that time. It did start up a little bit on the ether. Of course, I didn't switch the scanner to live data, but it looks like we did make it up to 87 psi right now. Let me crank it over a little longer, see if that fuel pressure continues to build. Maybe we still need to bleed it out, but it does sound kind of bad. I don't know if these have hydraulic lifters or if that noise is coming from the fuel pump.
Push it outside.
Push it outside.
The Pico. Check oil level and condition fuel in oil.
Oil is full. Doesn't smell like fuel. It's hard to tell. It looks very clean at the upper part of the dipstick and very, very black at the lower part of the dipstick. So someone may have added oil. I sprayed some more ether. We'll crank it again. I have live data on the screen. We will see if we build up any more fuel pressure. It's possible that that ticking noise is coming from the high pressure fuel pump, or at least the follower on the camshaft.
Check for ignition command.
Ignition command.
That was Daryl. Yep.
Okay, we still
Timing check next.
timing check.
CMP, CKP waveforms.
Okay.
Billy.
We still never built over our 87 pounds of pressure on the rail. The set point is showing 87 as well, but earlier on while we were cranking, it did rise up to 857, it looks like. Let me see. Ignition command, like you want me to scope the ignition coil? Or what?
Is high pressure pump sitting on top of valve cover?
Yes.
True.
High pressure pump is on top of the valve cover.
Correlation waveform?
Using which cam sensor? Bank 1 or bank 2? Oh, that's still on.
Bent valve?
Bent valve.
Says Craig.
Light the dipstick with a lighter and see if it burns. Is that an indicator of fuel?
Are you doing it?
Sure.
Is that a real thing?
Nope, I don't see anything catching on fire there.
Go get me a marshmallow.
Okay, at this point with the noise that we're hearing, would you want to go further? Could it be the timing chain that's ticking? Cam sensor, let me look at the diagram. We have 2 of them here. Let me find out what our 5-volt signal is and our ground.
For the correlation waveform, he wanted 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Okay.
Yeah, and that's Martin.
Let me go back to my scope. Now, someone already said push it outside.
That was Pico.
Now this, we were a bit steep on our 1 volt, but
Ignition, sorry,
go ahead.
you ready? Ignition current versus injector current would condemn/confirm timing. That's Mario. Put a pulse sensor Man, it's moving fast. Sorry. Put a pulse sensor with a stethoscope on that HPFP. Michael Nicholson.
Okay, we're gonna be just a second because I'm gonna. Someone want a cam crank correlation?
Ticking. Who heard ticking? I heard snare drums.
Electrical.
Hello, Dr. O.
Okay, cam shaft 1 and 2.
Relative compression. That is Salah. New name.
So we need a green and a white. Give me 1 second to connect these. I know Mario said that we could confirm it a different route.
Crank no start. J. Sorry, I'm just going to read all these out to you
Yeah.
as you go, or else I can't keep up with them. Coils from Matt Waka. Waka Waka. Undercam or scanner?
Underhood's fine.
FP injector pulse. Eric.
I'm not sure if this big connector on the top goes to the injectors. The injectors are mounted underneath the intake manifold.
FP48, I think cranking. Daniel Diagnostics.
I'm hoping that is inserted far enough.
Thank you for catching him up, Richard. Thank you.
I know Mario said that we could confirm this a different way, but since the cam and crank are easy to access, we'll go ahead and try and get those up on the screen.
Dr. O wants you to do an LS swap.
I'm sure somebody has done it on
I'm sorry, am I supposed to be on scanner now?
one of these vehicles.
Scanner?
Sure. I think I'll set the trigger on.
Literally will read anything on the screen.
And hopefully I have my piercing probes seated well enough to pick up a signal.
Okay, so now I'm not sure what what comments are actual recommendations and which one of them are jokes. Because
Okay.
here's a recommendation, but there's a bunch of laughing faces from people. Where'd it go? Check identifix and change the parts in order that they show.
Okay. I'll have to crank it over again. I couldn't tell if I had cam and crank from my location where I'm sitting. I got a light reflecting right on my scanner. Luckily it has an auto crank feature.
Sorry.
Okay, I don't know if we got anything on trace number 3. Okay, we did.
Power to coils from ECU 4 fuse on orange. Check for primary control on Gary of coil number 1.
Who's that from?
Daryl.
How long ago?
That was not too long ago. 7:39, 45, a few minutes ago. Sorry, I was laughing at a typo that people are
Power to coils from ECU number 4 fuse on orange. Check for primary control for coil number 1. Okay. Just so we have it on the screen, you want to go to my scanner?
I'm on it. Scanner.
This is our cam and crank sensor correlation. You guys may have to look up a known good to verify if that is accurate or not, or if you see an issue with that or not.
Hey, Jody. One of my people showed up. Say hi, Jody.
Okay, orange wire.
You want me under the hood
I'm still looking.
at scanner?
Give me 1 second. I don't know where you can go. Looking for ECU fuse number 4. None of these say ECU 4, so I may have to double check the diagram and find out which one of those goes to the ignition coils. Or is that for injectors? That was for coils, ECU 4.
Scanner still? Or you want me to move to laptop?
You can go to laptop. Ignition coil orange wire, which is
Chad,
what?
zoom in, we can't see, but I think that was when we were on the scanner.
Okay, ECU number 2 fuse.
True, you are my people too, but Jody is a reseller YouTuber. Same here, Jody. I just read the words that come up on my screen. I don't know that I understand everything I'm reading.
Sometimes you probably don't want to.
Well, sometimes I don't know if it's a joke and I'm just setting myself up to read something stupid. But I'm gonna read it anyway. The only ones I have to double read are Keith's comments, but he hasn't tried to trick me in a while.
Well, now that's going to encourage them.
No, I think he's too focused on this now.
Okay, ECU number 2.
Chad, will you do us a favor?
Huh.
Will you look at the CKP?
Who put that?
Everybody for like the last 30 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Well, kind of. That was Mario. Yeah, Mario.
Okay, so Mario wants us to look at the CKP.
Yes, we're on main Lumix.
Okay, Mario, let me know why you want us to look at the CKP.
Okay, I lied. I won't read everything.
So I'm waiting for that cooling fan to shut off. It did not like me removing that fuse with the key on.
Can you do us another favor?
Huh.
Can you call Scotty Kilmer?
I don't have his number, unfortunately.
I think that would be cool if you did.
Okay, Mario says look at the CKP. Once we get done looking at the CKP, I do have the amp clamp set up on the ignition coils. I do not have a primary voltage set up yet. You want me to zoom in on that, Mario? Let's see.
I'm on the scanner.
Okay, that's
so you
fine.
know.
Let me know what you want us to do, Mario. Let me pull up my comments so I can see.
Look at the CKP because it looks like the teeth are messed up.
Like some of the teeth are messed up.
Okay.
Okay. Was Mario the first one to point that out?
Are you asking me?
Uh-huh.
Can
Like-
you enhance?
Enhance.
Yes, please.
Okay, is that the portion that you guys are referring to?
Sorry. Inspect reluctor.
Okay. So I see that somebody, I'm not sure who pointed it out first, wanted to zoom in on the crank sensor. Sorry, the comments are going kind of fast, so we're jumping around a little bit. Somebody pointed out that we see an issue with the crankshaft reluctor. Are you on the main?
No, you want me to be?
Yeah, go ahead and go to main.
You were in screen, but we weren't
Okay.
main. Now you're main.
So this crank sensor reluctor that we're picking up should have a missing tooth, and that's going to be our wider gap, or kind of a weird squiggly line. All the other ones should be symmetrical, but it looks, go back to the scanner, it looks like we have an issue right after the missing tooth. Those teeth aren't really proportionate to what they should be. Okay. So do we still want the ignition captures, or do we want to just inspect the reluctor ring?
Main Lumix.
58 minutes minus 2? 58 minus 2. Okay, that's the crank teeth. Erico is telling us how many teeth we're supposed to have. Let's go ahead and inspect the reluctor ring right now. What are you laughing at?
Just an error I realized I was making. Oh, sorry, scanner? Oh, lordy.
I'm going to go up in the air.
We're on the main Lumix. Both of them. Both of them. Was there a sentence? Chad just needs to pull up both of them.
But what?
Chad just needs to pull up both of them. We need a camera on your face too over there as I read the comments to you. I just did. Look at both of them.
Both of what?
He's not listening to me.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that there is a small puddle of oil on the floor.
No, I think they're just saying words for me to say.
And let me pull up, since I already have it attached, I was prepared. Pull that sensor out. You want to,
Laptop?
yes.
He lied. He's not in the air. I'm very let down.
Okay, so it looks like we have a little bit of damage on the side of that reluctor, but what we need to look for is the missing tooth.
It's in there? Oh, the spot that it's missing from. Well, we're going to be here a while if we're looking for it in there. You get what you pay for. This is what free help gets you.
Right now I'm currently looking for the socket that fits the crankshaft.
I don't know if I can read that on his channel. I'll say it to him after the stream's over.
Okay, I'm almost ready.
4.
I was looking for my pry bar, or my half-inch ratchet.
It needs an implant. A tooth implant. How far in can you get that thing? Like, can you string that?
I can't really control where it goes. I can't bend it afterwards. So normally what happens is you get it somewhere and then it gets a drop of oil on the lens and then you can't see anything. There's got to be a missing tooth somewhere around here. Was someone counting the teeth? Have we reached 58 teeth yet?
I'm sure someone was.
Okay, there's our missing tooth.
Where?
Right there. There's no tooth in that spot.
I don't see it. Oh, okay, no, sorry. I was looking at the wrong screen. I was looking at the wrong screen. The other one has leg.
And if we look at the teeth right afterwards, we have some smashed teeth. That reluctor is broken.
Huh?
There's a crack in it.
String that show.
And it looks like it's kind of bent at that point as well. Okay, go back to main.
A chip tooth. Okay, main Lumix. 2 teeth. That's weird. I was trying to hide that comment.
Okay, so based on the fact that the reluctor is damaged and it's part of the crankshaft, at this point, I ignored the fact that the high pressure fuel wasn't building, that it had the little rattle, because no matter what, the crankshaft has to be replaced, or at least the reluctor inspected. I'm not sure how these are assembled, if this goes onto the back of the crankshaft, but no matter what, the engine has to come apart. There are other details that are going on, like the puddle of oil that's on the ground that I pointed out. There is a tiny hole, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, just a little bump out on the oil pan that the oil leaked out of. So I'm not sure what came apart inside of this engine and damaged that reluctor, but something did. So at this point, I recommended either disassembling this engine to find out what happened, or replacing it with a used or a new engine, and the customer declined and said he was going to take it to the junkyard, so I bought it for what the junkyard was going to offer. Any questions on the testing that we did, or any other testing that you guys want performed, knowing that this engine's never going to run properly with that crank sensor reluctor? And Pico responds again, push it out, we're done.
I'm with Pico. He just wants to go play Call of Duty now.
Yep. When the customer told me that the junkyard was going to, I think that he said the junkyard was going to give him $300. I offered him the same. He had a bill with me, so I think we picked it up $300 or $400, something like that. Just dripped oil on me. So I'm not sure what came apart. I don't know if it was something caused by the customer replacing the turbo. I wouldn't think so, but maybe it ran so good after he got the turbo in it that he grenaded the engine. It's possible that something came apart from the high pressure fuel pump. Since we're not building high pressure fuel, maybe the roller or the follower came apart, went down into the pan, got caught on the reluctor, smacked the crank sensor, and smashed in the reluctor, got caught up in the oil pan. To pull the upper oil pan, I have to pull the timing cover. Otherwise, I would have recommended let's spend an hour or so pulling that oil pan off to inspect it further. But timing cover has to come off first, which is a pretty big job.
Can we do a pulse sensor to be sure? LOL. Jay. Billy Yoder wants you to do the tire pressure. I'm not sure, Pico.
Was that question?
What's the Call of Duty number?
Oh, what's our username number? I don't have it memorized, so I would have to. I have your email. I can email it to you. So, any other questions or comments before we wrap this one up?
It's got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Martin, you want to come over here?
I'm just waiting for someone to make a meme from that crank sensor signal and the guy from the Tiger King.
I don't even know what you put. Have I been on mine yet? It'll be a surprise for me. I don't know what our background is.
You haven't been on that one yet?
I don't think so. Oh. You gotta do it. Here, I'll move so you can...
Hold on. I gotta get on this side.
Where are you going?
Right in the way.
I'm trying to get out of your way.
I can't do it. I'm not that small. My head's bigger than that entire boy. My head's bigger than the whale.
It's bigger than the whale.
I asked Valerie what she wanted for her background, and she said, Free Willy.
Yes. I've been asking for Jurassic Park, but he won't give it to me.
Okay, so Jay says that the customer lost a 10 millimeter in there. That's what caused the damage. You never know. It could be. I don't know how much he had to take apart, but I'm assuming that if it was something to do with the turbo, it would have went through the intake manifold and torn up more than that.
It looks like Billy's leaving.
Thank you for joining us, Billy. We appreciate you joining in. I'm not sure if this is you haven't been in the last one, I don't think, but stay safe out there. I know there's a lot going on, but keep yourself protected. Keep your family safe.
Your basketball head?
I think my head is larger than a basketball.
Well, my head looks larger than yours, but that's because I'm closer to the camera.
I'm like 4 feet back from her.
So is it fixed? I wasn't listening.
No, it's not
Well,
fixed.
not fixed, but
It's diagnosed. We're done. It needs an engine at this point. Hey, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great week. Hopefully your shops are still doing business, or you're at home with your family, keeping your family safe. One way or the other, I hope that you guys have enough money to get through this, this trying time. Stay safe out there. God bless everyone. And we're going to pack all this up because I have to do a live stream with my students at 8 a.m. From home, not from the shop. I got to clear all this stuff out
take it home.
so the other guys can work. Okay. Hopefully we'll have another one soon. I'm not sure when, but we will see you later.
Bye.